Oh, Jer, hey Jer. Uh, Jer, I was just on my way back from the Laugh Factory, and then
Oh
these
no!
youths.
You're not doing stand-up comedy again, are you?
I gotta perform, Jer. I'm running back, and then these youths in their black hoodies, these Antifas, chasing me down the street. But I know I have the Kavorka, but come on, you gotta be kidding me, Jer.
Was it because of the things you were saying in your stand-up comedy act?
Jer, you know I like to express myself. I can't help it. My name is Cosmo, for Christ's sake.
Well, why the hell do you think you're being chased by Antifa?
Stick a fork in me, Jer. I'm cooked.
Hey, is it Antifa or Antifa? You know, because I keep hearing people talk about the Antifa.
Come on now, Jer. What are you saying?
Is it like my Antifa or Antifa? My Antifa. Antifa? Antifa. Antifa? Antifa.
Antifa. Antifa.
Antifa. Antifa. Antifa. Antifa.
Is it Antifa?
Antifa.
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 Oh, well, we gotta stop doing this. Kramer.
Right, I gotta go back. I got a late night spot at the factory.
All right.
Oh, wait till they get a load of me.
I'm out of the contest.
I'm out.
the contest was just to not say the N-word on stage. All right.
That's the contest.
Jerry, I'm out of the contest. All right. All right.
All right.
Hello everyone. Welcome back to Pod Damn America. I am Jake Flores, and I've got with me, as always,
It's me, Carlos Delgado, still here.
coming in through a phone because Carlos moved out west, but we ain't gonna stop this goddamn podcast. Are you allowed to talk about why you moved?
I'm not allowed to talk about why I moved,
All
but
right.
it's not the only reason why I moved.
Okay. It was just it's a good reason, but as in many things in the entertainment industry go, if it's you're not allowed to talk about it, that means it's pretty cool. So congratulations on your mysterious reason that you're voyaging out to Los Angeles.
Thank you so much. All things are possible through Christ.
Yeah. For anyone who's been listening, people have been hitting me up in like the DMs and shit about whether we're gonna record more shit. Thank you so much for holding out and sticking with us and supporting everything. Sorry about the massive delay. I went on tour. A bunch of other personal crazy shit happened. We've been booked a lot. We're doing a lot of stand up and shit. But this is definitely gonna keep going. I'm very stoked about it. I'm particularly stoked about what we got for you today.
Jake, why don't we drop what's going on today?
Okay, so as promised in our earlier episode on Antifa, that was just sort of like the what do you call it? The tip of the iceberg? Is that the fucking word I'm looking for?
It's the tip of the iceberg, the point of the spear, the head of the cock, as I like to say.
Yeah. So I've been sort of like compiling a lot of notes and shit about what these books I was sort of dipping into in that first episode because I want to do like a more thorough sort of walkthrough of like all this crazy shit because there's a lot of fucking bananas shit in the history of the anti-fascist movement. So that's why we've been out of commission for a minute because we've been doing a lot of research and stuff. So I'm going to get into that shit I guess now. I don't really have any other opening notes. Thanks for listening. This is Pod Damn America. Here we fucking go. Okay, so in researching Antifa, I've been digging into a couple of different books. I'm gonna start putting all the sources up and shit. Somebody gave me shit about that. Some fucking nerd hit me up and was like, "Can you please shut up? Are you making a podcast about something no one else is?" Well, when you are, then you can cite all the sources you want. All right, you can make a podcast with a bibliography. David Foster Wallace with your footnotes. I don't give. All right, that's a good idea though. So I'm gonna start.
Also, if you would like to intern for us and notate all the episodes for us, we are also open to that.
No shit. Hell yeah.
Well, we can't pay you though.
Throw us some money, and then we can hire an unpaid intern, and me and Carlos will buy matching fucking lowriders or some shit.
I want matching Lolos.
Hell yeah, dude. And Pachuco suits, and we'll start dressing like Tom and Jerry on that. Remember that one episode where he wears a zoot suit?
Yeah, we're gonna everywhere we go is the Zoot Suit Riot. God damn it!
Hell yeah, dude! Throw back a bottle of beer. I'm gonna warn you. There's some ska in this episode. It's inescapable. I can't stop finding ska everywhere.
Oh, oh yeah. I almost bought a trombone this weekend. I feel you, brother.
Damn, shit's getting weird out there. All right, so in researching all this shit, I'm going to be drawing mainly. My main source is from a book called Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, which is written by a guy named Mark Bray. This book kicks ass. From what I'm hearing, it's like a bestseller right now. They marketed it pretty well because basically this guy wrote this book after Charlottesville. And he decided he just wanted to crank out a book about Antifa as fast as possible because he kind of saw the same shit we saw, which was like the mischaracterization going on in like Fox News and all that shit. So this guy Mark Bray is an old Occupy Wall Street organizer, and he had a bunch of connections with like anti-fascist organizers and stuff in Europe. And so the book is like very incomplete. It's sort of like presented as just like a starting point. He's just like, this is everything I got. Here's like all the ideology and stuff like that. Because a lot of it, he had to talk to other people who were then translating like texts and stuff from
Italian and German. And all that. Yeah.
Like a lot of this history just isn't even in English because all this shit is happening during like fascism in Italy and stuff like that, right? So that's the main text. I'm also reading from a book called Against the Fascist Creep by Alexander Reed Ross. It's pretty good. A lot of that shit is
when that come out?
I don't remember, not off the top of my head, but I want to say it was fairly recently too, because I think he talks about Trump and shit in it.
Okay, unpaid intern, take note of this point to source the book. Thank you.
Yeah, yo, DJ unpaid intern, record that shit. Okay, so yeah, so the first thing is sort of an intro chapter where he just talks about like why he's writing the book and all this stuff. Gets some things out of the way right off the bat. First thing is I never really thought about this, and this seems like pretty obvious now that I'm thinking about it. But have you the flags? Every time you see an Antifa logo, there's like two flags.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of times they're different colors. That's because like the original one is two black flags, and it stands for Jesus, I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it's anarchism and socialism. I'm gonna have to look that back up. That's not right. The one from Germany stands for like two specific ideologies back there. So every once in a while you see like a black and a red one, and it means like anarchism and socialism. You'll see like a pink one that means Fantifa, which is feminist Antifa.
Okay.
Actually, okay, I might be getting pink and purple mixed up because one of them is queer, one of them is feminist. I don't know. Anyway, pretty interesting.
I feel like the one with two cocks on there would be the queer one.
That's us, baby.
Yeah, gay as fuck. Okay, cool. So we have all these Antifa factions and whatnot.
Yeah, but I'm going to go way, 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 way the fuck back to the Dreyfus Affair to get us started on where all this shit comes from. So, the Dreyfus Affair. Hold up.
The Dreyfus Affair, as it happened in Dreyfus, Germany?
No. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a second. Okay, all right, I'm back. I just wanted to get these notes in order just to make sure I didn't fuck this up. Because
no problem.
Before I even get to the Dreyfus Affair, I want to talk about something. This book starts off talking about European anti-fascism, which is rooted in the Dreyfus Affair, which happened in 1898 in France, right? But another big missing hole in this book this guy kind of admits to is that, like, there's really, like, two forms of Antifa that sort of, like, melded together as the years went on. One of them is... in Europe, it's largely against anti-Semitism, because that's like what the big thing to fight was in terms of like that was the main source of fascism in in Europe in the pre-war, like pre-World War One, revolutionary state or whatever. The other type of Antifa is or anti-fascist thought is anti-racist, right? So a lot of like scholars look at Antifa and they go like, well, the origins of it have to do with fascism itself being this anti-Semitic thing in Europe, but before all this stuff, because this is happening in like 1898, right? But before all this stuff in like the 1860s, the KKK was already happening in America, right? And so there was what you could really call anti-fascist movement against the KKK in like these like
in the rural South of America.
Yeah, because I mean like like black people in like the South in these communities that were being like terrorized by the KKK were like burning down like churches and shit like that, and like or not churches, but like places where the KKK was like having meetings and stuff like that, and like carried guns and shit. It was fucking crazy. So like there was like a lot of that. I'm gonna get to that in a little bit because that's a little bit later in this chapter. But you could arguably say that predates technical Antifa. I don't think it matters, but it is something that like it does get erased a lot or whatever, because there was a massive just slaughter of black people in the South during the late 1800s and mid 1800s. That,
right. Okay. Yeah, well, that's something we can keep in mind for sure.
Sure, and the reason I'm like thinking about that is because when that guy shot up fucking Vegas, the big headline was, this is the biggest mass killing in American history or whatever. But that's only because like the ones from the 1860s involving black people were just like not officially in the history books because they were just like, they just were incredibly racist or whatever.
Well, Jake, that's before history happened. We all know that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's according to a lot of people. Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah, we call that the shadow century, Jake.
Yeah. Who knows? The shadow knows. Okay. You ever hear that story? The old radio show, The Shadow.
Yeah, I remember The Shadow.
Okay. So, the Dreyfus Affair happened in France, right? And then basically what happened was there was this Jewish military officer, Captain Alfred Dreyfus. He had wrongly accused of allegedly passing
ancient ancestor of Julia Louise Dreyfus.
Oh hell yeah, that's on topic. I was gonna go Richard Dreyfus. That's way funnier.
They're cousins.
Yeah. They wrongfully imprisoned him for his horrible dance moves and insistence on eating a big salad. What are other Elaine things? He was hoarding all the sponges. Yeah. He was out of the contest. Okay. So I'm out of the contest, Jerry. So okay. So he was wrongfully imprisoned for allegedly passing military secrets to the Germans, yet emerging evidence of his innocence fractured French society between anti-clerical left-wing Dreyfusards and anti-Semitic militaristic anti-Dreyfusards. So before Antifa, there was Dreif and anti-Dreif. Among the most notable examples of the latter were three proto-fascist groups: the Ligue Antisémitique of France, the Anti-Semitic League of France, the Ligue des Patriotes. Okay, so my pronunciation of a lot of this shit has gotten better. The French stuff significantly worse. So just prepare yourself for that. And the Ligue de l'Action Française, the League of French Action. Okay, so these are all like weird proto-fascist groups, right?
Okay, I thought that was French auction. I was like, well, sure.
Anyway, these people are like marching around the street yelling "Death to the Yids" and all this shit, right? So the first anti-fascist action sort of comes up about this thing because in these Dreyfusards and anti-Dreyfusards, there are people like plastering the city with posters to reclaim public space for the anti-Semites and shit, and they took offense to the anti-Dreyfusards by staging counter-protest stations and even infiltrating a number of large meetings. So I'm just reading directly from the book. So there's all this stuff going on where they're like breaking up meetings and shit like that, and it's like proto-Antifa, right?
Okay.
Meanwhile, a little bit earlier, the Klan is happening in the U.S., and there are like organized armed self-defense groups in some cases. They even torched plantations of former slaveholders. Moving into the 1890s, Ida B. Wells launched a significant anti-lynching campaign through her paper Free Speech and her groundbreaking pamphlet Southern Horrors. Wells, who carried a pistol with her wherever she went, ardently advocated for the right of black self-defense. When a group of African Americans set fire to a town in Kentucky in retaliation for a recent lynching, her paper wrote that they show some of the true sparks of manhood by their resentment. So, like, this is really interesting because when everyone is arguing about like gun control and like the Second Amendment and shit, most people on the left are extremely like pro gun control, but a lot of people that actually have roots in like this form of resistance and like the Black Panthers and shit like that, are like really like we need our fucking guns. I don't know how I feel about like either side of that shit, to be honest with you, because I do think that like if we just implement gun control today, like as it is, all that means is like young black men are just going to get arrested for having guns, right? The crazy fucking mass shooter redneck guy is the police are never going to come after him, right? So there's something to be said for that.
The people that have guns today, or at least the fancy ones, are the ones who get it legally. Not so like implementing tighter gun control is going to affect the first tier of victimhood, which is lower income or lower socioeconomic status people. That's just how that works.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you said that because before, I don't know if you know the history of the NRA too much, but so at one point in time it was run by kind of like hunting Vermont liberals, basically.
Totally.
And they totally wanted everybody to have guns, even if you were black or white. They didn't give a shit. But then during the implementation of the Southern strategy, people turned the NRA. There was like a schism in the NRA where the leadership split between the super lefty hunters and then this conservative Christian right, who made a coup, took over, and then saw the Black Panthers, and they were like, "Nah, we can't have black people with guns. We gotta change the script. We gotta make an old switcheroo." And they were like, "White is right with guns." It was a very interesting time to see the NRA switch over like that. So that's my little tidbit about the NRA. Thank you so much.
Totally, that is fucked up, dude. Okay, so
it's really fucked up.
Around this time, what's going on is that there's this like sort of ideological split in all these European countries between like socialism and communism and nationalism, right?
Yeah.
So, let's see. In Austria and elsewhere, primarily with petty bourgeois constituencies, they were frequently steeped in the quote-unquote socialism of fools, anti-Semitism. So that's as the historian puts it, is that there's socialism, which is like, you know, solidarity and sort of this revolution coming out of like the monarchy and shit like that. And then there's anti-Semitism, which is the quote-unquote socialism of fools, like the, you know, which is the same thing that's happening today. Like there's like a left that's like, we have the answer, you know, universal healthcare, all this shit. And then there's like other disenfranchised people on the right who are like, no, the answer is being angry at immigrants and, you know, yada, yada, yada.
Right, it's like looking at a libertarian and be like, you don't know. What are you doing?
Yeah. So, like, this is happening in Italy, where Mussolini is coming up, right? And basically, there's a lot of similar turmoil to what there is, like, in America right now, where, and in all over Europe right now, too, where the like, Italy is, like, Italian socialists are being attacked for being isolationists, sort of like not being pro-war, right, for their failure to compete in the imperial arena. So Mussolini's coming up and he's sort of like preaching to those people and you know, like playing into they're mad at Italy for not taking part in the imperialist actions of World War I, right?
Be like, me so sorry, I'm not a war hawk.
So the only person that on the world stage that really seems to understand that this is a predatory imperialist war is Lenin in the Bolshevik Party over in Russia, but he'll shortly be sort of like chased away and shit and, you know, exiled or whatever as like the revolution happens and Stalin fucking takes over, right?
Yeah, Stalin comes in after John Lennon, yeah.
John Lennon, yeah. The Beatle who landed on the moon, right?
Nobody's proven it wrong yet, Jake. Nobody's proven it wrong.
Okay, so socialist unity would not last long, however. In the late 1890s, the German sociologist Edward Bernstein broke profoundly with Marxist orthodoxy by arguing that since conditions were gradually improving for workers, socialism could be achieved gradually through the electoral process without a need for revolution. So most people in Russia at the time are like, most leftist like socialist thought is that this shit has to happen through revolution. But there's this guy named Bernstein who is one of the only like leftists who believes like, no, we can elect, like we can cause the revolution to happen through electing, just through the electoral process. He has faith in it or whatever. I wrote a note about him because his name is Bernstein, and if you follow like Run the Jewels and shit on Twitter, you might be familiar with the Bernstein split universe theory. That would be,
yes, I am.
in my opinion, this is like how we got here in the Hell 2017 universe. Is this guy making some dumb decision about how like you don't need to overthrow the fucking monarchy, man. You know, we can just vote, right? That's what everyone's saying right now, right?
Right, that's what everybody's saying.
Okay. Let's see. Let's move forward a little bit. Okay, so Benito Mussolini, right? He's got these guys called the Black Shirts, or the Squadristi. They roam the cities and countryside, destroying what they call the Red Plague, right? So, important thing to understand about early fascism is they view, like, Marxism as the enemy, right? Which is, if you've been on, like, a fucking shitty alt-right message board, the same shit's happening. They all hate Marxism.
This is the alt-right. This is the alt-right of fascist Italy is Marxism.
Yeah, I mean it's no, anti-Marxism.
Oh, anti-Marxism. Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. This part's gonna be a little dicey. This is a little weird, right? So
let's do it. We're in it together. Let's knock it out.
As fascism is becoming a thing, right? Mussolini is sort of like climbing his way up the ranks. He's forming this like party. He's creating all this anti-Marx sentiment, anti-immigrant sentiment, all this shit, right? He's doing Trump shit. He's hosting the early Italian version of The Apprentice. He's
El Apprentico.
yeah. He's I don't know how you say you're fired and whatever, but
Ese finito.
yeah, es infinito. Yeah. He eventually, and this is where like the origins of like fascism as a word come from. He forms this thing called the Fascio di Combattimento, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So fascio as a word, which is the origin of fascism, comes from the classical Roman symbol of a bundle of sticks surrounding an axe known as a fascis, right?
No, you're not telling
do
me.
you know? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know. Don't tell me this is real.
It's fucking real. It's the same word that the word faggot comes from. What? Isn't that fucking crazy? Like, how is this not front page news? No one has brought this up.
Oh my god!
It's fascism. Literally, like the word literal, like literally from the literature means faggotism.
Faggotism. Oh my god.
That's fucking crazy, right?
Okay. Does that explain why Italian fascists were so very well dressed? Is that what's happening right now?
I don't know, man. And it's like, I don't want to get into like an extremely come town, lowbrow level just use of the word faggot as like a joke, but for a not like you can see the humor here, right? I mean, every Nazi would be pretty mad about that, or most of them at least.
Well, the Nazis would be like, I wasn't sure about the Italians anyways, but most Italians would be like, guy, this is not, no, it's a different word. It's how do you say homonym? What is word? Phononym?
I was just fucking, yeah. It's not no homonym.
No homonym? Oh, buddy.
I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, it's weird that, because a lot of Italian people are like, really dark skinned, but they're considered white. And I started reading about this and go, oh right, they have a fascist past in Europe.
Right.
That explains why they lumped in with white people. But anyway, okay. So during early Italy,
that was quite the discovery we just made.
I know, I couldn't fucking believe it. I had to like look it up, look up all the fucking Latin origins and shit. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so during all this time, there is the first militant anti-fascist organization rising up to resist the squadristi. I'm gonna butcher all this shit. The squadristi are Mussolini's black shirts, right? So the first big crazy like military or militarized anti-fascist group is called Arditi del Popolo, the People's Daring Ones. They're founded by an anarchist named Argo Secondari in Rome in late June 1921. Right, the entire range.
So they are the daring ones. Is that what you said?
The People's Daring Ones, yeah. Pretty fucking cool,
So they come
right?
to you and be like, truth or dare? Like, is that their line?
Yeah, the only way to get around them is to pick truth, and and just have to tell them who you have a crush on.
And the truth is, you guys look fabulous.
Yeah, so the squad, the Arditi del Populos, they were made up of like communists, anarchists, socialists, Republicans, and people that didn't even fall into any of those things. I mean, it was in true Antifa tradition, like the purpose of it was just anti-fascism. It came from all different people. You know, it's just one group that you just go into, right? Their fucking logo was a skull with a dagger in its teeth, surrounded by a laurel.
Whoa!
Badass.
That is badass.
Yeah. Within a few months, the Arditi mobilized 144 sections composed of about 20,000 members to defend towns and cities against fascist incursions. Initially, the newly formed Arditi won some notable victories. For example, in northwestern town of Saranza, squadristi had routinely terrorized the local population by destroying union offices and murdering leftists throughout the early months of 1921. Yet, a punitive fascist incursion into the town of in June to avenge the death of a local fascist was promptly driven off by Arditi sections along with local workers. 20 fascists died in the battle. So this is like before the fucking nonviolence. I mean, they were just fighting, you know, fascists as they were coming up, right?
Yeah, true anti-fascist combat.
This is like an action movie, like a Expendables sort of situation. They've got the berets on and shit.
Do you think there's room for a historical treatment of this war of fascism versus anti-fascism for the silver screen? Because if there is, I will start writing it tonight.
Dude, that's all I've been thinking about. Like, this shit is so badass. It would be amazing, but you know.
Let's get Jude Law in it. I think he'll be great.
Yeah, my mind immediately went Stallone because he's always wearing a sideways beret, which is like the everything I'm imagining here. But yeah, no, fuck him.
Yeah, but he can't make an Italian, like a good Italian voice. So they'll just call him El Mudo, which is Italian for the mute one.
Yeah.
So he just can be the badass, but never has to talk, and then everybody around him can be British and beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get started on that movie tonight.
Okay, so the Black Shirts marched on October 31st, 1922, Halloween. A ceremonial...
Timely!
Yeah. Was merely a ceremonial representation of their leader's cagey manipulation of fragmented liberal government. So that's also another thing that's going on as Mussolini's coming up, is that he's well aware that there is, like, a fragmented left that he's just sort of playing off of, which is, like, what we have now is... because we're so far right as a fucking country, we have, centrist Democrats and then, like, democratic socialists.
Right. So definitely the split between progressive and I suppose centrist. So wait, what was the split here in Italy in the left? Like, what were the two main categories in the left?
It's basically, like, socialists are the centrist and then communists are the far left.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and you see that, like, all through all these different stories, is that, like, there's basically this infighting between, like, these really specific communist and socialist ideas, and, like, people in the middle are often, less revolutionary, less violent. They believe in sort of infiltrating, like, through the electoral process, and then people in that communist part are usually pro, just, like, revolution until at some point Stalin decides he's in this thing called the third phase, which is that now because, like, what's going on is Stalin has got this thing called the Comintern, which is Communist International. So it's this organization that's sort of overseeing the concept of, like, trying to instigate communist revolutions all over the world, because, like, true communism can't really exist without everyone sort of being communist, which is why we have this crazy,
Right.
weird,
Or
fucking.
or else you get Cuba.
Yeah, right. It needs like trade with other communist states to sustain itself. And so that's why we're just kind of like locked in a battle of ideologies probably forever, because the United States is this huge superpower that's like everybody should be fucking capitalist, and then communism was trying to implement itself by spreading like this, but it wasn't really happening. But so at some point, Stalin starts to realize that like it's not going to happen. So he starts deciding that like, oh no, communism in Russia is more about us being like a strong state or whatever. And a lot of people think that like this is why his Russia like sort of imploded, is because they couldn't really commit to their plan, and so they became like a nationalist state, which is how he just became another fucking fascist dictator or whatever, right?
Right, you're bypassing the obvious downfalls of your system by invoking patriotism.
Yeah.
So like that, yeah, it's the perfect way. It's the perfect getaway.
It's any like politician, like shitty leader is eventually just going to appeal to fucking patriotism, right? So
right, that's why Trump started from day one. And God bless America. And if you don't love America, you're a criminal.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not quite into like Antifa yet, but there are just some straight up like attacks going on Mussolini at the time. So
right.
he had like I think 4 assassination attempts on him like in a few years, right? So the first guy who tried to assassinate him.
Stalin?
No, sorry, Mussolini.
Mussolini. Okay.
The first guy to try to assassinate Mussolini is named Tito Zanniboni.
Tito Zamboni?
No, his name's Zanniboni. And the only reason I make a
right.
distinction is because there's literally another guy who tried to assassinate him named Zamboni.
Oh, that's amazing.
So Tito Zanniboni.
Was that Zamboni? Nah, that was Zammy Boney. God damn it.
Yeah. Nah, man, that's Zanniboni. So Tito Zanniboni is a guy who checked into the hotel room next to Mussolini to try to shoot him as he was giving a speech on a balcony. Classic assassination move, right? Speech, balcony.
Classic attempts.
But he called somebody on the phone, a Freemason, when they were planning the shooting, and the call was intercepted, which meant he got arrested, right? Mussolini used the attempt as an escape to end the control of Parliament over the government, making him accountable only to the king. So, like, he used this fact that someone was attempting to assassinate him to just get rid of, like, Parliament. And but there's still a king, so he's like this weird, like, demi, god thing, like, that lives in between. He rules everything except he answers to the king. It's fucking weird, right? So
right.
The following year, in April, the Anglo-Irish aristocrat Violet Gibson opened fire at the Italian leader as he was exiting the International Surgeons Congress, but the bullet merely grazed his nose. He's like 50 Cent. He got shot in the fucking nose.
He got shot in the nose. Oh, that's why they call him 10 cents.
yeah. Or whatever the fuck.
That's ridiculous,
dude. What is Italian money? I have no idea.
The lira.
Yeah, they call him 50 lira. Or 50. Okay, another guy in September, the anarchist Gino Lucetti threw a bomb at Mussolini's car. It injured 8 people, but not him. And then finally, in October... yeah. I'm imagining it was one of those big cartoon bombs. That's what I think all bombs from the past look like.
With a giant wick sticking out of it? Yeah.
Yeah. He's just Mario. Well, I guess he was Italian. Yeah, it was Mario.
It's Mario!
Yeah. Another guy put on a suit and threw a bunch of hammers at him. No, I'm just kidding.
I saw him fly through the sky like a raccoon, I did.
Yeah. He hit him with a fire flower.
That's fucking ridiculous.
In October, a teenager named Anteo Zamboni, that's the Zamboni we finally get back to.
That's a Zamboni.
Shot Mussolini, but miraculously the bullet went through his jacket, leaving him unharmed. Zamboni was then murdered by an angry mob. So
Jesus.
A lot of people think that this one was faked, that like Mussolini was so tired of getting shot at that he hired like a person to do a weird like Chris Angel stunt with him where he gets shot but it's like a fake bullet and it's like he went through my jacket and it didn't kill me or whatever, and then he used that fascist style to as an excuse for more repression because he was like in the process of becoming a full-on dictator and getting rid of like the parliament and shit like that, right?
Right.
No one knows, but that's
he's like, clearly, I need more power since all these many men are trying to come after me.
Right.
These 50 lira.
And that's something that like we're seeing right now with fascist groups, where like I'll like link to it and put it in the info for this page. But there was this great fucking clip somebody shared the other day of a video of this like Proud Boy guy who's in the middle of some fucking event or whatever, and he's like, I've been maced, and he's all like,
yeah, he
faked it.
macing himself.
So like people just formed a mob around him, and he couldn't get away, and he got so tired of keeping up the fake like I got maced thing that eventually he just drops it, and he's like, all right.
Oh no, fucking! So he was like an Italian soccer player that faked getting kicked in the shin.
Fucking goddamn right, yeah. He's
to get a
flopped.
penalty card. You fucking coward! Goddamn, I'm so angry now.
That's an extremely apt metaphor, because it's exactly what they're doing. They're just trying to win a fucking penalty card, a little bit of sympathy or whatever, by going like, oh my god, somebody attacked me. These anti-fascists are the real dangerous ones, right?
But what if Mussolini's second attempt was real, and the bullets went through him? He was like Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction. He was like, I gotta rethink my life, man. This was a miracle we just witnessed.
Yeah.
Right. So then what happened?
Okay, so around the same time, Hitler's coming up in Germany, right? And he's got his brown shirts, which are like an imitation of Mussolini's black shirts, and he is noticing that there's also a fractured left in Germany, right? So between communists and socialists and shit like that. So while they're all infighting with each other and forming things called like the Red Soldiers League and the fucking Schwarz Rot Gold and all this shit, these like
the Schwarz Rot Gold.
That means black, red, and gold in German.
I thought that was just like the dopest Jewish punk band in the world.
Wouldn't be surprised if there was something named after that. Schwartz means black. I didn't know that.
Interesting.
Which I'm not even gonna go there.
Well, may the Schwartz be with you,
yeah,
Jake.
I was thinking of something much more fucked up. Okay. Do you know where I'm going with that?
Moving forward.
Okay. This is not Cumtown.
We're not Cumtown.
Somebody like DM'd me and they were like, I can't believe I learned something. Or I got something positive out of listening to Cumtown. They started listening to our podcast. So that's cool.
That's great.
But anyway.
But anyways, what happened next?
So Hitler is like rising at the same time, right? And he's noticing all this like infighting happen, and he's taking advantage of all this like militarism, traditionalism, hypermasculinity, anti-Semitism, the concept of like social Darwinism, right? And he's like coming up with what basically Roger Stone and Trump would use, fucking 100 years later to win, right? So social Darwinism is like really similar to this like free market ideology we have now, like once you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and shit. Hypermasculinity, he's appealing to like so basically there's all those disgruntled war veterans who got fucked up and humiliated in World War One, and like they're like the hypermasculinity fucking militant thing appeals to them in the same way that like Proud Boy shit appeals to those idiots,
Dude, we got kicked out of a VFW in Minneapolis this weekend during the 10,000 Laps Comedy Festival on some straight up veteran hypermasculinity. I didn't get a chance to tell you about this, but some old ass pseudo veteran, I suppose, saw one of my friends, a young lady, cursing during karaoke and kicked her out, like got her kicked out of the venue. He's like, women shouldn't be cursing.
What a fucking dork.
What a fucking loser, right? I'm like, you've killed men and you can't hear fuck. And I didn't have to defend my friend. Shout out to Joanne Shinderly, dope ass comic in Portland, Oregon. You got a dirty mouth, girl, but I love it. Anyway, so she was like, fuck you, walked out. I grabbed like 15 people and we all left. And this old dude just started slow clapping as we left and being like, women should never curse in public. I was like, oh my God, is this Minneapolis?
You know what's weird about this shit?
Yeah, that happened, man.
Like, post-Trump, we're all like, oh my God, I can't believe these people are like this and people really believe all this shit. But the more I read this like history books where they connect the dots from it going all the way back to that shit and all the way up to today, it's like this stuff never went away. Those people just got like quiet and afraid to say that shit out loud like for a while. That's why they liked Trump so much, because they, now it's their time, and they're allowed to finally say this idiotic shit that they've like been harboring. I think it's really depressing.
Right. It's been there the whole time. I feel like I'm like that's yeah. I 100%. It is depressing, but if I have to slap an old man, I will do it. I believe in America.
Yeah, hell yeah. Okay, so around this time, a lot of German Antifa stuff is popping up, like stuff that we kind of talked about in the last episode, like the swing kids and all that bullshit. But there's also the German anarchist militia Schwarzscharen, the Black Flocks, or the Black Troops. Was founded in 1929 to protect the meetings of Free Workers Union of Germany, Anarcho-Syndicalist Union, and the Syndicalist Anarchist Youth. The fucking crazy, like, technical language in these things is so... it's amazing that people name themselves such crazy shit. But anyway, outfitted entirely black with matching berets, fucking told you, the Schwarzscharen paired their Nazi street fighting with creative propaganda, including, wait for it, puppetry?
Oh, of course.
Puppetry.
Okay.
Music and street theater. So these were like, there were these guys called the Black Fox in Germany that, you know, would fight Nazis in the street and shit, but then they would also put on a puppet show.
So clearly this is like if the buskers of New York City became left-leaning politically active.
Totally. Or if the Black Panthers realized they needed to recruit people through puppet. Like, you go either way. I don't know. I don't know where the person teaching them to do puppet shit fucking comes into the equation. But yeah.
Do you think Lenny Kravitz would be part of the Schwartz Panthers?
I don't know, man. Does he know how to work a marionette?
I'm so sorry about that one. Okay, let's keep it moving.
So there's communists and socialists also that had like choirs and theater and all sorts of what's called agitprop. So the Black Flocks the Black Flocks are becoming a threat to the fascists up until a point where, as things start to intensify, they started storing explosives, right? Because these are like anarchists, and they love those big cartoon bowling ball bombs for some reason.
Of course they do.
So at one point, somebody tips them off, and their cash gets raided, right? So they get knocked out pretty quickly, right? So meanwhile, all this stuff's happening. There's the centrists of this era, the socialist Republicans of the time.
Sure.
They start to notice the rise of fascism, and their answer to it is the creation of something called the Iron Front, in quotes here. The Iron Front is like this sort of idea of solidarity of like unions and labor organizations and stuff like that against like the rise of this Hitler guy as like a political force. So in keeping with what a lot of the conflict seems to be, and a lot of the places that get actually lose to fascism, you've got these sort of like centrist, like weak people that are kind of going like, oh no, don't attack them. Like, we can beat them in the actual political arena by like, you know, running these like, well, you know, these compromising like centrist candidates. It's like the same shit.
Right. Don't you understand? We have our trump card, a policy of overwhelming appeasement.
Yeah.
Duh.
So the creation of the Iron Front also reflected the frustration of young party members with the stale, didactic nature of their party's propaganda, right? So there are people that are, like, sort of getting to resent it, and, you know, but the Iron Front, the reason they called it the Iron Front is they're like, we got to appeal to our frustrated, like, anarchist youth and our, you know, revolutionaries. We can't just be, like, the regular name of our party anymore. We got to call ourselves the Iron Front. So it's, like, it's their, like, Pokemon go to the polls, like that sort of thing. They're like, oh, we got to brand in a way that
it's like, it was like, hey kids, hey youths, how you doing? If you go to Pokemon Go this weekend on your smartphones, there's a special gym located above the polling area, and you get a free Pikachu if you vote. Like, what kind of cross promotion attempt is this shit?
Yeah, it's really lame and it doesn't work, right? So meanwhile, there's this Russian socialist emigre, Sergei Chakhotin. He saw this stuff happening, and he saw all these like Nazi logos being, you know, thrown up and posted everywhere and shit. And he noticed someone draw a line over a swastika to cover it up, right? So he then gave these people the idea of turning not just putting a line on there, but turning the line into an arrow, and then doing two more, and it turning into these three down-facing arrows. In his mind, the three arrows stood for unity, activity, and discipline, or the SDP, unions, and the Reichsbanner. These are all organizations and shit.
Okay.
He is sort of this guy that, as the centrist of Germany are going like, no, we're the Iron Front now. We're cool. You know, like you can bop with us, kids. He's like this guy who's like,
you can beat it. You can bop it with us.
Yeah. He's this guy who's like, no, I'm taking to the street and I'm fucking covering up these swastikas and we're doing this like actual like fucking leftist style, right? This I would compare to the concept of dirtbag leftists today that we have with all these people that are sort of like, Chapo Trap House is too unruly, and they make mean jokes and stuff like that, right?
I heard them say the F word, and by F word I meant
fascism.
I was gonna say, thank you for saving me.
Yeah.
I saw only one out, and I didn't want to say it.
It means the same thing as we've discovered today.
Oh yeah, it's fascist. Oh my god, I forgot
the real F word, fascism. So somebody said of this guy, Chacotin, quote, "We shall make ourselves ridiculous with all this nonsense," they argued, although the three arrows would later become one of the main symbols of anti-fascism, right? So this guy's saying, like, no, we need to fight it with actual direct action, and they're going, we're like, you're going to embarrass yourself, like, this isn't how a leader works, yada, 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 right? So he was ahead of his time, right? He was, he was harassing people on Twitter, he was making unsavory jokes, and he was putting three arrows on top of swastikas, right?
Right.
That
was his meme.
Uh-huh. Eventually, the Iron Front, as is put in this book, was found to be made of tin, right? The Iron Front fell real fucking hard to the actual Nazi uprising because, like, they appealed to people through their advertisements and shit, but when it came time to actually make any real policy against them, they fucking crumbled because they were like a bunch of hollow politicians, right? Sound familiar?
Right, shit. Okay, man. Why am I getting goosebumps right now? Do not stop.
Yeah. Okay, this gets so fucking good. Okay, so Jesus, I'm just going to read through something here right now. The popularity of the Iron Front prompted the KPD to form Anti-Fascistic Action, which is the where the original Antifa like flag and shit comes from, as a network of factory cells, neighborhoods, groups, apartment blocks, and other geographical associations. In the 1980s and 90s, many anti-fascist groups would adopt the name of this German organization. So this is what we were talking about last time, where like you see these Antifa logos, they actually have a root back in Germany, right? That's Anti-Fascistic Action with a K. And anti-fascistic with a bunch of C's and H's and bullshit, right? Okay, so Anti-Fascistic Action's local executive boards consisted of representatives of the KPD, the RFB, Communist Sports League, and earlier communist anti-fascist platforms such as the Red Mass Self-Defense and the Kampfbund, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So it's everything we've been talking about. They're a loose coalition to fight economic, social, and legal repression above all. A basis on which social democrats and communists could join in defense against the Nazis, in self-defense, rather. So it moves on to say, yet the unity was to occur under communist, not socialist control. That would be the leftists, communists. Rank-and-file social democrats were welcomed into anti-fascist action, but the KPD was still instructing its operatives to sabotage the Iron Front at every turn. So they were like, you fucking liberals, your thing fell apart. You're welcome to join us, but we're not rebuilding the fucking Iron Front because it didn't work. Pokemon going to the pole didn't fucking work, right?
Okay, so they're like, fucking shut down the curtain. What's the option?
Yeah, so the things were moving further left because the center fucking fell out, right? Doesn't matter. The shitty fucking center continued to try to use its like failing tactics to beat Hitler. I cannot stress this enough. Does this sound familiar to you? Okay, so on January 30th, 1933,
I'm so scared.
Reich President Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor, right? In 1932, when Hindenburg was running against Hitler, the 1932 socialist election slogan was "Smash Hitler, vote Hindenburg," right? So this is like almost a direct echo of the liberal current motto of like, have you seen the other guys? Like,
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
hated direct
Absolutely.
action. They hated moving farther to the left. They didn't want to, become communists or whatever. So they're like his electoral, the electoral slogan that lost, that gave the world Hitler, was like the same thing that we're doing right now with the Democratic Party of like, hey, like this other person is so horrible, you can't vote for them. You have to vote for us, right? You got nowhere to go. It doesn't
It's
fucking
it's like
work.
it's like literally it's like a pelican in a suit being like, "Oh, it's a living." Like that's the best they gave us.
Yeah. So this gets even weirder because smash Hitler, vote Hindenburg. That's like it sounds like a poor coincidence in terms of his name, the Hindenburg, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
Right.
It's not. The blimp that blew up the Hindenburg is named after this guy.
Shut the fuck up.
It blew up 4 years later, right? So it's not directly named after him because, like, when we say the Hindenburg as like we refer to the Hindenburg as this big blimp that blew up that like ended the concept of Zeppelins being a thing you could party on forever. We refer to it. We refer to
Yeah.
it. It was like the air Titanic or whatever.
It was Sky Titanic, right?
Yeah, that's like we refer to it as the Hindenburg, but actually Hindenburg is a type of blimp. The airship that blew up was called LZ-129 Hindenburg. So like LZ-129 is the specific name of that blimp. Hindenburg is like
Okay.
the subtitle, right? Doesn't matter though
Okay.
because the fucking crash was so famous. The word Hindenburg forever is just synonymous with this fucking blimp blowing up and with this guy losing an election that gave us Hitler, right? That's how hard he failed. Like
That's how hard he failed.
he lost to Hitler, and then 4 years later, his name became synonymous with blowing up a blimp.
That's like naming a supersonic jet the Gary Busey.
Yeah.
It's not gonna end well for anyone.
So
Okay, so this Hindenburg guy really just beefs it up. Hitler is in power now.
Hitler's in
I believe.
power.
Is that what you said?
and in their eyes, Hitler was merely a variation on a theme of his party's inability to follow through on its promises. Oh, I'm sorry, a theme on a variation on a theme. So what they thought about Hitler at the time, even on the left back then, was like he's gonna get ousted eventually. They're like, there's no way. Like eventually,
Oh
he's
no!
gonna get fucking impeached, right? Totally not happening.
Stop!
I know it's like terrifying.
This is so scary.
Um,
So Hitler's in. They're like, he's gonna get impeached. It'll be fine. And then what happens?
well, then Hitler happened. So like we can kind of see where things move from there, right? Meanwhile, in England, around 1934, Italy and Germany had already succumbed to fascism, right? So the thing
Okay.
that's interesting about England as opposed to Italy and Germany fell to fascism. England didn't. Here's why. I'm going to end on this story, I think, because we're getting pretty close to the end. But this is like exactly where I wanted this to get to.
Professional Jake.
Important thing to understand about how England like didn't end up falling to fascism is they had a really, really, really strong anti-fascist organization, right? So there was this
Okay.
guy named Oswald Mosley. He was from the British Union of Fascists. That was like his organization. They were ramping up anti-Semitism with the support of the Daily Mail. It started to become really real, right? So fascism was emerging. He had a couple failed attempts before he formed the BUF, the British Union of Fascists. But he started to get going really hard around 1933 when Hitler sort of like rose to power, right?
Okay.
People were wise to what he was doing, and they put him out pretty quick. A group of 1,000 Jews chanting "Down with the Nazis, down with the Hitlerites," set upon BUF members distributing propaganda. 6 Jews were arrested, some of whom had seriously pummeled the fascists. They beat the shit out of a bunch of Nazis, right?
All right.
There were groups called the Zionist League of Jewish Youth and the Jewish United Defense Association. There's all this shit forming, all these Jewish Antifa groups that are like not putting up the anti-Semitism happening in England, right? There was a group called the Legion of Blue and White Shirts, which terrified the fascists so much they referred to them as the Storm Troops of Jewry.
That should have been in Spaceballs, 100%.
Yeah, it's so weird that stormtroopers in Star Wars are named after Nazis because I saw Star Wars before I like read about World War II as a kid, so now I keep thinking they look like stormtroopers in my head when I read about all this
Yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. It's the same thing for me. The Emperor is just Hitler without a mustache.
Yeah. And in my mind, Hitler can shoot lightning out of his hands.
He could, Jake. He could.
He had force lightning. Okay,
Yeah,
so wouldn't that be fucking crazy?
that would have been crazy if Hitler had force lightning. Okay. We
Okay.
can't make two back-to-back
We
episodes.
can't. We gotta get away
These
from it.
Star Wars references.
We joke about two things on this show: ska and Star Wars.
It's Star Wars.
And,
Well, we have to combine them and make our treatment Ska Wars.
Ska Wars, yeah, hell yeah! It's like Darth Vader, but he's checkered.
It's a bunch of mods versus zoot suits.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
So
okay, so why did England resist so hard?
okay, so as all this stuff is happening, there is the exact same argument happening as is happening today and happened everywhere, which is that a bunch of older Jews tended to criticize those who were quote unquote copying the Nazi violence, which we loathe and detest, right? So older Jews were saying like, you know, hey, if you punch a Nazi, you become a Nazi, etc. And the youth was just so fucking strong and drunk, I guess, that they just went like, we don't give a shit. The younger Jews tended to argue that, quote, fists can be put to better service than propelling pens. So they did not listen to this fucking cynical thing where they said, don't fight the Nazis because then you become a Nazi and then no one will listen. They just fucking went and beat the shit out of them, right? Oswald Mosley is a really strange fucking situation because he keeps disappearing. Like I'm gonna give any way to this real quick, but like he gets stamped out and eventually he goes to prison, but then he keeps coming back. Like after World War II, he gets out and then he gets shit beaten out of him again. He keeps recurring and recurring. So I was reading about him and I was like, wow, he sounds like Voldemort, right? He just like keeps coming back every like 20 years. So I looked it up, and Voldemort is based on like this guy, like not Voldemort specifically. Voldemort, I think, is supposed to be like this is from J.K. Rowling, like talking about her fucking work post whatever. Which I mean, she just decides every couple of years that a character was trans or fucking whatever. Like so, like who knows? But according to her, she based Lucius Malfoy, Draco Malfoy's dad, on Oswald Mosley because his wife was a woman that they got married in like in Joseph Goebbels' apartment with like Hitler there and shit, and it's crazy.
Oh shit!
But they have all these similarities to characters or whatever. But anyway, this whole thing culminates in England with this thing called the Battle of Cable Street, right?
Okay.
Okay, so the Battle of Cable Street is like it was the definitive end of Oswald Mosley's BUF. Basically, there were these things where he was having these big marches where people were like, marching through the street and yelling, "End the Yids, get the Yids out of here," or whatever. They had a big march in a small town called Tony Pandy, which is the most British fucking thing I've ever heard in my life.
Hello, would you like to have a cup of tea by Tony Pandy?
Yeah, where it was shut down by Antifa because they just showed up and wrecked so much stuff that they found a loophole, right? So legally, the police could only shut down hateful speech if it caused public disorder. So anti-fascists just showed up and caused public disorder, right? Which then led the police to be able to shut the thing down. So they were able to use the laws in that way. And I'm going to get to this as we get further into this stuff because I think this is going to take a few episodes. But like, there are certain reasons that this isn't exactly the way it works today. Anti-fascist movements are a little bit different today because a lot of this stuff isn't happening in the streets anymore. It's happening on like 4chan and shit like that. But it's still important to show up and intimidate Baked Alaska and fucking make him cry and shit. Okay, so I want to pause real quick so I can find the beginning of this because I'm just going to read through the story of a fucking Battle of Cable Street because it kicks ass. So just okay, here we go. This is probably like the most cited, successful anti-fascist event in the early Antifa history in Europe. This is cool as shit. It successfully ended Oswald Mosley, right? Here we go. The Battle of Cable Street.
Here we go, baby. Here we go.
Okay, here we go. On October 4th, 1936, several thousand fascists amassed to march through London's largely Jewish East End. Yet, as one Jewish anti-fascist recalled, quote, "We resolved that under no circumstances would we allow fascists and their propaganda, together with their insults, to come along to our community where our people were living and working in peace." End quote. According to the police, 100,000 demonstrators flooded the surrounding streets to prevent the fascist advance. Half an hour before their march was scheduled to begin, the police charged the crowd with their batons to clear some space for the BUF. As always, the fucking police show up to help the free speech protesters come through the fucking BUF.
Well,
right?
the black shirts had permits, Jake. You know that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the argument, right? After the crowd retreated, leaving several men injured on the ground, the barricades went up. The anti-fascists on Cable Street turned over a lorry to block the road. They fucking flipped a train car.
Well, yeah, take that.
So they blocked up the end of the street by flipping over a goddamn train car. While others raided a nearby construction site for materials to add a mass of mattresses and furniture, a wide range of anti-fascists, from bearded Orthodox Jews to rough-and-ready Irish Catholic dockers, defended the barricades with paving stones that had been dislodged with pickaxes. So they're just building this huge fucking wall.
Can you imagine that? Irish Catholics and bearded Hasidic Jews fucking shoulder to shoulder fighting fascism?
Listen, I don't know.
How is this not a movie?
I don't know if you've ever tried to drive a car through like South Williamsburg, but those Orthodox Jews can block some shit. They can get in your way.
Family. It's a whole clan of them. I guess I'm not going down Bedford. Okay. This too shall pass.
They knocked a lorry over in front of me, and I was just trying to get to Greenpoint. You know that?
But then they ask you, "But are you Jewish?"
Yeah. I get that all the time, especially when my beard gets big and it's like a holiday that I don't know. Like I just run into like a place I am, go, "Are you Jewish?" And I'm like, "No," and then he's just like, "Okay." I don't know what it means. Anyway.
Okay, so Irishmen and Jews, shoulder by shoulder, fucking blockading shit.
Here we go. When the police charged the overturned lorry, anti-fascists threw small boxes of gunpowder fashioned into tiny bombs. As the fascists chanted, the Yids, we're going to get rid of the Yids." And the anti-fascists shouted the Spanish slogan, "They shall not pass, no pasaron," right? That comes from some Spanish Civil War shit we'll get into later, but there was that was basically what people in Madrid were chanting as Franco was trying to take it over and become a horrible dictator and shit.
Well, of course, because Gandalf was fighting Franco. He was like, it was in Spanish, so he was like, "You shall not pass."
Yeah.
But in Spanish.
It's about
a lot of people didn't know that Franco was a Balrog.
Did you know that if a fascist tries to pass you, and you make him answer a riddle, and he doesn't get the riddle correctly, he can't pass.
I'm a Sphinx.
It's in their code, yeah. So they shall not pass. Not only is that Lord of the Rings fucking bridge troll bullshit, that's also what they yelled in the defense of Madrid, right? So that had happened recently, so everyone's yelling, "They shall not pass." They adopted that as like this thing that they yell as they keep these fascists from trying to get past their fucking overturned lorry. And they threw small boxes of gunpowder fashioned into tiny bombs. They had like these weird like magician flash paper things that they fucking made up. That's the coolest. The coolest part of the story is the weird made up like weapons they just fashioned out of shit.
You know that one of them was a magician.
I
and
think
they were like, "We need explosives. What do we have?" I was like, "Well, I have dubs and paper. We can make it. We can do it."
yeah. It was the guy that shot Mussolini. They had their fucking Chris Angel.
You saw your Eli mind the freak.
Yeah. Mind Zamboni. It was the great Zamboni. that was the guy. Yeah, the great Zamboni. That's a good magician name.
The great Zamboni.
Yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, the fascists continued to arrive. Some of them in cars with nets rather than glass in their windows to mitigate the destruction of anti-fascist stones. They knew people were going to throw rocks at them, so they replaced their windows with like nets and shit, like fucking Mad Max style, right? Yeah. Finally, Oswald Mosley arrived half an hour late to his own thing, like a real asshole. In an open car protected by black shirts on motorcycles. So for real Mad Max shit. He's just in a like weird car with no top on it, probably up on a big chair or some shit, riding it like a surfboard. There's that guy's playing the guitar, the electric guitar that shoots missiles and shit behind him. There's a bunch of motorcycles around him. It was just insane. Just like it sounds like it's from a fucking video game, right?
Right.
Adoring fascists saluted, while the anti-fascists booed and called them rats. More and more police arrived, bringing up the total to 6,000. But they were increasingly unable to maintain "quote-unquote" order. I don't know why that's an order in this, why it's in quotes in this book, but it is. I
think the book gets the heavy irony of of order.
The book is it's a saucy bitch. Rocks and other projectiles, such as, get this, half-filled aerated bottles of lemonade that exploded when shaken and thrown, continued to fly towards the police and the assembled fascists. So they would take bottles of lemonade that were just old and shit, and like, how you leave like juice out, it starts to create gas, like rotten bottles of lemonade that they would shake up and then throw at them. So when they blew up, like, old fucking lemonade or piss or whatever the fuck it was, would smash all over them and just be disgusting and make them throw up and shit. When the mounted police charged the anti-fascists, this is like my favorite part of this whole story. When the mounted police, so police on horses, when the mounted police charged the anti-fascists, a bag of pepper was burst in front of a police horse, and marbles were thrown at their feet. So there's these cops coming on horses, right? And somebody threw a bag of pepper at their noses and then a bunch of marbles at the fucking horse's feet. So it's like, like they
literally pulled a Home Alone on a horse.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. They hit him with a swinging bucket, and it's
they were the sticky hoof bandits.
Yeah. It's sad to think about because the horse probably got fucked up. It's like when you're watching Game of Thrones and you're like, oh no, they stabbed the guy's horse. But it's such a funny fucking move to throw a bunch of marbles at a fucking horse. It's just like, okay, bag of pepper, marbles, bricks, and the contents of chamber pots rained down on them from apartment windows. Still, a more violent scene unfolded when the crowd attempted to de-arrest someone in police custody. Thus, before the fascist march could advance, the police were forced to cancel it. Outraged blackshirts shouted, "We want free speech." Sound familiar?
Yes!
Overall, 80 protesters were arrested and 73 police were injured. The next day, BUF attacked the government for having surrendered, quote-unquote, to the Red Terror. Much of the Jewish community has grown sick and ashamed of keeping their heads down, according to one Jewish anti-fascist. And at what would become known as the legendary Battle of Cable Street, Mosley did not pass. Fuck yeah.
Yes! Oh, so badass.
Yeah.
Then it became Chris Angel, Mind Freak the White. Came back from the dead.
Zamboni.
So good.
So the Battle of Cable Street is seen as like a huge success because after that he was like fucked. He was eventually sent to jail once Hitler like rose and shit, and it effectively is the figurehead of having stomped out fascism as an uprising in England. There's still on Cable Street to this day a huge mural of like depicting the battle itself and shit. It's amazing. If you look it up, there's some dumb fucking think pieces out there written about how, it was actually bad because it legitimized yada yada yada. It's the dumbest shit ever. There's one that's kind of famous. I read it. I can't remember the guy's name, but I'll put it in the notes. But the argument he's making in sort of this piece is that the Battle of Cable Street was actually bad because later on, some of the press in England started to report on it as being like riots and hooligans and out of control, right?
Right. Trying to turn it into a violent thing altogether.
Well, I mean, it was violent, but it was violent for a good reason. It was a fucking battle.
Well, no, I mean, trying to turn the perspective on that on the anti-fascists as just a source of violence, as opposed to a political movement in response to something,
right?
Which is also sounding very familiar as is today.
Totally, and that's exactly what's happening today. The thing that I'll say to anybody who comes at me about this fucking this piece that this guy wrote is that the crucial mistake, and this is a professor somewhere. He's like some guy who put some time to this, but the crucial mistake that he made, I think, is that he put the blame there on the anti-fascists and not on the fucking press. Like, fuck whoever wrote a piece that was like, is this the real Nazi? You're being an asshole. You're being a pretentious dick by thinking that you thought of something no one else thought of, which is like, wow, if you think about it, maybe these guys are delegitimizing. Because the only way that they're actually being... The only way that actually works is when you write the fucking article about how it's possible that they delegitimize themselves. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you don't...
You're manifesting your bullshit into the world like some kind of terrible, minor, shitty political god.
Right. So anyone listening to this, if you work for the fucking Daily Show or just MSNBC or fucking whatever, you are the problem if you come up with the hot take that like the anti-fascists are violent and thus that legitimizes the idea that they're the enemy. Because what you're doing is you're becoming the very person you're fucking talking about. So stop fucking doing it. That's my whole piece on this. So anyway,
Stop doing it when you say Antifa. Is it going too far by existing? That's what you're saying. So shut up.
The teens are calling it Antifa, like that shit. You know.
Yes, that is exactly the tone.
The masks are full of jankum. It's dangerous.
And now stew with the weather.
Yeah. So, like, fuck off. Anyway, that's where I'm going to wrap everything up for today, because I'm about halfway through. We can do the rest of this in another recording. But, yeah, look up the Battle of Cable Street. It's fucking badass. Support your local anti-fascist movement out there punching Nazis so you don't have to. Ignore the...
Go to a meeting, bring some cookies, make a friend.
Yeah. Ignore the idiots. I will absolutely admit and defend the idea that there are a lot of annoying people within this movement. That doesn't make the movement bad. Believe me, I was at a fucking show the other night. I watched a band called Reviver. They fucking kick ass. I cringed so hard because at some point someone just yelled out, "Punch Nazis!" like with that horrible California accent. Don't listen to that person. They're just an idiot. They're just hanging on to the fucking whole thing. The thing does have important actual functions. Yeah, everyone's horrible. Think about that next time you think about this shit. It's not just one group. Everyone fucking sucks. Anyway, I guess I should plug us. We've got a Twitter, Facebook page. This is Pod Damn America. I'm Jake Flores. I'm at Feral Jokes on the internet and everything. We have a Patreon. The second half of this episode is going to be behind the paywall, so sign up and we'll start putting out bonus content and bonus episodes and shit immediately. Thank you so much for supporting us. The more you support us, the more of this shit we can put out. And read this book to you, so you don't have to read it. But you should, if you're really interested in this, you have a chance. Read Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook by Mark Bray. It's a great fucking read. It goes way farther than all this stuff. I have a show. God damn it, I can't remember. I'll put it in the text, and I'll put an ad for it in my pinned tweet. But I'm doing a show that I'm very excited about in November, early November, called Stand Up Fight Back, which is an activist panel and benefit stand-up show.
Is it, Jake?
I forgot. A guy named Mike Gams out of LA is putting it on. He's doing a lot of good work, and I can't remember if he even has a venue nailed down yet, but it's going to be on, I think, November 7th. Look up my shit online. I'll put it up there. It's going to be fucking tight.
November 7th. Go support our big play.
What about you, Carlos? You got anything?
So if you're listening to this, I'm probably still in Portland. I'll be back in Los Angeles November 1st. Just go to Comedy Delgado or just go to my social media at Ceviche Poppy across the board for my shows and stuff. And please support live comedy. Support us. We are here for you guys.
Tight. All right. It's PDA.
Big.
England 1936, the grip of the Sabbath day. In London town, the only sound is a whisper in an alleyway. Men put on their gloves and boots, have a smoke before they go. From the west, there is a warning of a wind about to blow. Like seas are marching to the east, as is Mosley with his men. Dressed in the clothes of deepest black, like a gathering hurricane. This is the British Union with its flag of black and red. A flag that casts a shadow in Berlin and in Madrid. Listen to the sound of marching feet by stones or by the gun. Remember those who stood up for their daughters and their sons. Listen to the sound of marching feet and the voices of the ghosts of cable streets. Fists, stones, battles, and the gun. With courage we shall beat those black shirts. Listen to the sound of marching feet and the voices of the ghosts of cable streets. Fists, stones, batons, and the gun. With courage we shall beat those black shirts down.